Hello, everyone. If you don't know me, which I imagine is just one or two of us, my name's Jason Curby. I'm a senior full stack developer at Ware. I've always worked in I've also worked in project management roles. I've been a contractor for a long time. My work and learning method is I hack things together a lot. I do a lot of sort of hackathon style stuff, quick and dirty. I think some of that's going to reflect in how I show and work today. It'll be a bit more natural, I think, a bit less formal, because I always sort of try to get prototypes done, learn the basics, what I need to know, and then I sort of tend to work on polish and mastering, cleaning things up, doing things, I get things 90% of the way, and then that last 10% over the line comes afterwards once I get the core working. So what I think will happen today, I'll work through all the core, I'll smash things together, I'll make mistakes, I'll talk through everything, and it should be a nice sort of intro from a very learning perspective, as a learner's point of view, of just getting right on top of Power BI. What I have done is I took the opportunity for this web tech workshop to learn Power BI myself. So I'm actually only about a week or two ahead of anyone just starting. So by no means am I an expert. I felt that would be more natural. I could bring people along for the ride as I learned and condense what was most valuable and smash that out and present that today, in a workshop. So yeah, it's been a learning journey for me also, and I'd like to, if any questions pop up along the way, I imagine I may still have trouble answering them myself if they're at a higher level. So we'll collect all those, and I think I'll chase all those up and do a follow-up document or even a blog post after this, to take this to the next level and wrap it up, anything that arises today during the presentation. So yeah, initially I was quite, as I spoke earlier, I wanted to not come across as I was presenting from an ivory tower or anything, because else that would make me feel a bit embarrassed and awkward. But as I'm down and dirty learning with anyone coming along today or watching this. I only started last week, and so I've done a lot of beginner stuff, and we'll go through those today. So I won't repeat myself again. But first off, I'd just like to thank a few people that I did use as basics for tutorials and that helped me come along. The first one, which I'd highly recommend, is always the documentation, the Microsoft Learn documentation. I'll share these links after this in a follow-up document. They have been very good because they are very visual. They're not just documentation in a sense, they're also visual tutorials, so they've been good. I also found a fella who I'm a big fan of, who's very casual and a good teacher also. His name was Devon Knight. He's from Pragmatic Works. I really liked his Power BI tutorials. They do a lot of teaching and learning there. Not affiliated with them in any way. I found them really good for learners. And there was a lady, Laura GB from Hatful of Data, who also helped introduce me to one of the last parts we'll cover, which is Google Analytics and bringing third-party data sources and apps into Power BI very easily. So yeah, I have to read my notes quite often and go on from them. But so what we're going to cover today is what is Power BI, obviously. I'm going to jump straight into visualizations before going into the theory. I felt I'm not the biggest fan of theory in a condensed period. I like to sort of get my hands dirty, and I feel like that will make more of an interesting presentation. So we'll do visuals first and a bit of a hands-on, but then I will try to do basic theory and intro to phases of the projects and how Power BI works. Then we'll cover DAX, DAX, which we really have to sort of cover for Power BI, which is sort of the language you use after you've pulled in the data to manipulate it and get more valuable output. We'll also cover relationships between data. I'll try not to go too much into data because I feel that's sort of a data scientist, the data team's area, and that comes before Power BI. But working on Power BI, I definitely learned very early, even though I thought that might not be the case. I did learn that manipulation of data is a larger aspect of Power BI than you might think to begin with. And we'll do an Excel import, so very simple Excel data import. We'll also I'll also show the value of just being able to link directly to web files, pulling data from the web, so you can keep it updated automatically. It doesn't have to be local. And we'll cover the basics. So what is Power BI? It does Power BI in a very simple sense is, let me get my visuals up. Although they're not really going to be needed. I did initially want to do visuals, but that will quickly be replaced simply by me working on things. It turns your sources of data into interactive and coherent visuals, basically. It's just a means of really generating nice reports and visuals and dashboards from data from any source. The number of sources you can get are incredible. I'll show those later. So the basic workflow is we collect our data, and I'll go over this in more detail in the future, but we just collect our data, we turn them into visuals, and then we can share those visuals. We can share those as apps also. So for the app developers or people that focus on mobile, it doesn't just have to be in a formal, big dashboard settings, lots of screens. We can push them out as their own little apps, which is also good, especially for us. All right, so I don't want to talk too long without getting stuff done because people will zone out. I'll zone out. So you get data, visuals, dashboards, and apps. So this is what you could expect to be the data we're going to bring in, a basic Excel sheet. We all know those quite well. I think I might skip a lot of this stuff, these visuals, and talk less, and we'll get straight into the basics so I can show it in the works. And then we might come back to more talking after this one. Just because I want to get dirty. I want to get into and building stuff because this is what we're really doing day to day, and it's what I would rather be showing us if we're just going to be doing a workshop today. So we got Power BI Desktop. It is kind of needed. It's free to download and use. I think I'm on a trial for 30 days, but that's on a higher tier. So it's you can jump right into it without having to pay a lot of money. What we're going to do to begin with, very simple introduction. I'm just going to show everything, bringing in data, creating a really quick visual, and just show how easy that is for someone who's never done it before. Like I said, I just started recently, and before you knew it, I had a collection of visuals, reports, all sorts of different sources of data. So we're going to get through those today and try to create at least a messy equivalent and show you how easy it is. Okay, so first go. What I'm going to do is going to bring in some data. We're just going to use an Excel sheet today. I have an Excel sheet which I've downloaded. You can just load these from, from your PC. You can download them, load them, whatever we want it to do. So this one is going to be one, I believe, on sales. And before we do it, before you bring in any data, we're going to go through this in a more formal theory method, these phases in the future, but initially I was going to show us getting dirty and creating stuff straight off the bat. So we're going to transform this and change this a little bit because we don't want everything here. We might want to change some stuff. I'm just going to show how quick and easy it is to get into the Power Query editor, which is what we're looking at now. And this will let us pull in our Excel data and sort of change it, adjust it, make it suit what we want to do with it in Power BI. Now, everything we do here are steps and can be changed and reversed and edited in the future. So nothing here has to be fixed. It could be changed and added to down the road. Okay, so first thing I'm going to show, I'm just going to do some real quick basic changes of this data before we start building visuals, because I think visuals are like the best things for presentations just because we have something in front of us that we're visual. This is a visual presentation. I really don't want to be talking the whole way through it. I want to show us what we can smash out really quickly. But we'll do some quick changes here. So, for example, what I want to do, I want to change the segment, the unit sold, and I might delete some of the columns in here. So if we go to unit sold, we can see we've got the decimal points. That's not going to work for us because we want to sell units sold as full. We don't want to sell half of product, basically. So if we go to unit sold, and then we're going to go to transform, data type, whole numbers. Quick and easy, replace. That's just simple cleanup. We might change the segment. Where is this one? So if we want to do the segment, let's say we want to do uppercase, transform, we want to format to uppercase. That's going to make it easy to see down the road for visuals. Like I said, all of this on the right-hand side, we can go back, we can change, similar to Adobe products, Photoshop. If you're familiar with that, it's very easy to go back and change and adjust our steps and what we're doing to the data once we bring it in. So all of this is very dynamic. What do we want to do next? Let's say we don't want to show, let's say we've discontinued VTT, we don't want to show it anymore, so we're going to do some quick filtering. We're just going to remove VTT. We don't want to show that product in our report for whatever reason. Easy to change. We can bring it back in the future. No big deal. And I think that's all for now. We've done some minor adjustments. The original data is not lost. We're just changing it once we bring it in for our reports and for using it in Power BI. So that's the first, called the first phase. Very simple first phase of just manipulating the data once we brought it in. I'll go through those in the future when we get back into theory. But for now, let's just bring these in. Close and apply. So we've brought in our data. And then we can just get right into what I think is anyone beginning with Power BI knows that, you know, this is what we first think of. We think of the visuals and what we can do with visuals. So I just want to get back in here. But we'll make sure we've brought the data in. This is available in the data view over here. And over here, we can start working with it and just, we can go ham. We can now start treating it as like a blank canvas and drawing on it, creating visuals similar to Word, Photoshop, anything we might use to draw stuff. It looks busy, it looks complicated. It was a bit overwhelming for me to begin with, but it's really straightforward once you just start using it very quickly. So we could do stuff like I've just clicked the bar chart and it's created an empty bar chart for me to fill. I'll work with that in a second. Might do a text box, click up here, text box, as you'd expect it to work in Word in a sense. Text box. Very simple to add titles over on the right-hand side. Format title on. So these panes, this pane, the format tends to apply to whichever visual we have, tile we have selected at the moment. So if we go over here, I can change its title. Very, let's use this as a basis for now. So let's say we have visual title. So now this is, once you start doing it, how easy you realize it is to start generating reports with Power BI. Let's drag profit over. We can either drag it over into an X or Y axis over here or for the graph, or we can start selecting it. And Power BI will draw something. It'll start picturing what it thinks we might want. I like doing it manually just so we have a bit more control. Let's say we drag. We'll just drag profit over for now. So this is our profit. But it's one graph. We don't want this. We need some more information. So we have profit on the y-axis, and let's just drag month number or month name over into the x-axis, and bam, profit by month. Now this is not separated by year. We'll cover that down the road because that's another aspect of manipulating the data and start building relationships between years, months, days. And getting more accurate data in the future. So easy to change graphs. Bar graph, I think line graph, easy to do. And depending on what we want to present, we can sort of smash some stuff together. Let's say we want to bring in, sometimes this requires a bit more work down the road, but let's try some extras. Sales. Okay, so we're now showing sales as well as profit. Sum of sales, sum of profit. Easy, move it completely. We can just show sales if we want to just drag that in instead. Sales, just see, quick and easy to change. Date breakdowns here, but that's a bit messy, not what we're looking for right now. We'll cover that later on. Okay, so one bar graph done. Let's do really simple, click and drag country over. What do we want to show? So we're showing the country, and let's say we want to show profit by country. So another visualization just showing, okay, we've got far more sales going on in North America. Might want to be a focus. Drag around, graph number 2. Tile number 2, I should say. Okay, let's see. Let's get something a bit more valuable for us now. Well, we want to do a clustered column chart. So we want to know which companies and which segments might be doing the best sales for us. We've got our sales, we've got our what's selling what. Let's create a new detailed bar chart. Clustered, I'd say we want clustered. So because I have this selected, it's changing this one rather than bringing a new one, which is not what we want to do. Change that back to a map. Let's get rid of it for now. Clustered column chart. So new custom column chart, clustered column chart. So companies and segments are doing the best. Let's see, select sales. So we want to do sales, gross sales. Number 1. Countries. So what does this give us? We're now showing gross sales by country. Now, most of the time, you know, Power BI is pretty smart. It's going to give us what we're kind of envisioning. If it doesn't, we work on that in the future, and I'll show examples of that. But for now, it's really great to just smash out whatever you want, really, and just start seeing what it can show you. If we chuck in everything, you can just see it just starts going crazy. All sorts of data. It just builds what it thinks we want to begin with. And often, especially when you're starting off or doing simple reports or standard reports, it's going to give us what we're looking for. Manipulating that to give us exactly what we're looking for is what we can cover probably in the second half. So let's say sales, sales, country. Let's change that to product and segment. Let's change it to this one. Stacked. And that's not giving us what we want, so we'll cover that later on. But we can see here that you know, small business and government doing far more sales. We can start seeing what product, Passio giving us the best. This is where our strengths are. Easy just to start, you know, visualizing our sales, start gaining an understanding, pulling whatever value we might want from this particular report for this data. If I do something like sales, but I'll move on from here though, but this kind of shows how quickly we can build things. One more I'll show a slicer. So let's say we have our months, but we only want to see particular dates and times. What we can do is drag a slicer over, and I might use the pre-built example for this just to show it now, because I've been a bit messy in here, just showing how quick and easy it is to draw up some dashboards. If we go over to a pre-built one, we can see one I've built in the past shows us the same thing, the map, the profit by the month and the year, the segment sales. What we can do is we can drag over a slicer, which is this one right here, and we can give it to by the date. So it's very easy to then manipulate what we want to show rather than the full data. So this is like a great explorer. If I just want to see a particular month or a particular year, I can just change the slicer and it's going to adjust the data in the report accordingly. So, you know, that's when we immediately start bringing in some interactivity into our reports. And we can also do a different type of slicer, which we can select dates or time periods. But that one's better covered in the future when we can do date by month. Okay, so that's a very quick report, messy report. We'll get into some cool things I found while doing this along the way, but let's just show something like we have our report. It's very easy to change themes, small thing, but it does help. Big fan of dark mode, obviously. But these can be generated, saved, and we can quickly apply themes to different reports if we want to change the styling. Okay, anyway, so that's a simple way of creating reports. Click and drag, select data, expect it to be smart, do it for you. great to get started, get your hands dirty, just jump in there and start pulling stuff in. And before you know it, you can create multiple pages showing all sorts of data. And that's without having to do any manipulation or fixing the data or creating relationships so that it shows exactly what you want to show. We'll cover that next. But let's say we've got a report. We can also do something cool like the mobile report, which is, we can switch over to the mobile view, change to dark mode, and immediately just start creating a second report that can be specifically shared and used on mobile. Now, these don't interfere with one another. They're both going to be separate, but they do let us sort of quickly, change and add the same components to build our own mobile report, which we might throw in an app. We might throw in just to share in Power BI for our mobile users. So that I found that's very easy to do. And now I'll get into something really cool. This is the less tedious part of Power BI. I'll just make sure I get into the right spot. Let's say we don't want to do any of that. We just want to get some really good insights into our data, into our Excel sheet. Don't have time or the desire to learn or create visuals like that, especially if we've done a lot or we're time sensitive and we just want to get some value from our data that's easier to read than going through Excel spreadsheets or relying on someone else to do something for us and we don't have the time. And this is only getting more powerful, as we know with ChatGPT, insights and AI, and just the improved analysis of data. We can actually auto-generate reports from any data source. So if we want to do that, let me make sure I'm in the right spot. And remember, we can go into our data hub and we'll see the financial report, the finance Excel sheet that I brought in. So it should be the financials here. I don't need the preview, but we can create reports automatically in Power BI online on the Power BI service. We don't need the desktop to create stuff. We can just click a button and start creating something for us. So I've just told it to pre-select the data, choose what data it thinks is best. We can customize that in the future. And bam, it's just created basically what I was trying to smash together in a tutorial for us. This is a great baseline. There are power user tools where on top of this data, you can start creating ChatGPT generated reports, analysis, long form text descriptions and summaries. I'm not at that level in terms of access. It's a power subscription, which I don't have, but it does give us basic insights regardless as part of Power BI, just sort of the level one. So down here, we're already seeing, we've got our reports, we've got our information that it thinks is valuable. We can get this and export it and sort of adjust it and edit it our own way. But this works as a great baseline rather than having to go through the process at the beginning. It's giving us summaries, already valuable data, valuable insights pulled from the data. That's if we just want to see what we can get from data to begin with without having to go through, all the steps before. I could try this on a half a dozen different Excel sheets, see what I can gather from data, what might be valuable, what I can move forward with. You can use this to show someone, what we could do, what can be done. It's a lot more powerful just because we all love generative AI stuff here. Makes our lives easier. And I think it's just going to, this sort of stuff, just auto generation is going to start replacing the more tedious tasks of me showing you what we were doing earlier. So this is definitely something, I think if there's one takeaway from everything here, it's the simple things like this, I think, that ultimately are always the most valuable. Unfortunately, I'd like to think that, all the hours spent creating reports and visuals and making them pretty is great thing to do, great thing to learn. But at the end of the day, this stuff's just, especially it's just going to get increasingly more powerful and accurate and know what we want. So just the auto generation of reports and dashboards for us from the data I love it. I think it's great because I'm a big believer in just auto generation. I'm not going to lie. I use a lot of ChatGPT. I use Midjourney, and I love this sort of stuff because it does I feel like it does improve our efficiency immensely as we start to understand it and as it starts to improve, even if we're just using this as a baseline to start creating different reports, it's the power of this stuff to just improve our efficiency and what we can deliver, I think can't be overstated. Okay, so that's, yeah, like I said, this was a lot quicker when I did the practice, so I don't want to ramble on too much. I might do a quick, I feel it's important to do a bit of theory. I'm going to keep it minimum because theory is the sort of thing I feel like people phase out of. I do, if you haven't already phased out. But, since this is what we're sort of covering, a beginner's journey through Power BI, I would at least like to very briefly go through it all before we go back to smashing out some more detailed examples, and we'll do them a bit slower. One for me, in terms of notes, and as I'm going through them myself, I'm still working a bit slow through Power BI. So it will be a bit easier, if a bit more tedious to follow. But if we do the theory, at least we've walked away sort of understanding the more formal, aspects of Power BI and how you might approach a larger project, or how someone like myself, if I was presenting at a more formal engagement, would sort of give a more formal, professional presentation rather than just tinkering with things. So, and like I said, there was a guy that I watched that I like to shout out to again that sort of talked through all this. He's been really good. And that was Devon Knight from Pragmatic Works. He sort of gave a very good overview in terms of how a professional might approach each phase and what each phase sort of represents. So I'm going to quickly try to do that in 5 minutes just to fill out the time here and at least have that covered. I might get a new doc up and just talk through this in at least as interesting a sense I can without me creating and tinkering with things in front of you. Because we've already covered a few of these phases, but I'll just cover them here for the sake of completion. When we're going to go through a Power BI project, we're going to approach it with what he considered 4 common phases. Phase 1 and 2, I kind of just briefly showed then, and I'm going to show in a bit more detail next. Phase 1 is sort of just skip to the next phase. So it's the phase 1 is sort of when we're getting the data, when we're discovering it, getting the data sources. For the most part, we can make the assumption that the data has been collected, by a development team or data scientists. It's generally, in a pretty complete state, but we do know that we are going to have to work on it, clean it, change it, purely for our reports and for what we want to do with it in Power BI. So phase 1 is sort of the data discovery and shaping phase, which is what you just saw me do. I did some very basic discovery in terms of just grabbing the data. I just grabbed the Excel sheet, I discovered the Excel sheet. And then shaping it was when you saw me I removed some columns that I didn't want. I didn't do that, but you might remove columns you don't want, change the headings. You can rename headings. So for example, if a heading comes across incomplete or inaccurate or it's too long, and we don't want it to display that way on the report, we might change the titles. We might change, I removed the decimal points so I had more complete units sold. That's sort of the data shaping, when we're sort of cleaning the data, cleansing the data, and just preparing it for Power BI. So I'll keep that simple. That's phase 1. Phase 2, which we didn't really do, but what we're going to do next, just to show a bit more comprehensive overview of that part of Power BI, is what's called the data modeling phase. Now when I just did that, I just sort of grabbed the data and went straight into phase 3, which was visualizations. Data modeling is when we're creating relationships and we're preparing and presenting the data, different sources of data, to better work together for Power BI reports. The most common one, which I'm going to show to give us an example of DAX relationships and modeling shortly, when I might create a new report, what is pretty common practice is you have a separate date table where you cleanly build all of the dates over a time period you might want to cover, and you build all the associated fields in a single table that might show month name, month day, day number, all sorts of stuff, because using a new field using a new table, it helps you sort of separate like financial year versus general year. It might help you separate out Black Friday sales, different holidays that might be different days for each year. They might be on, different dates, and it sort of helps you by building a relationship between a cleaner date table. You can use that as a basis for your formulas and your analysis, as well as your reports in the future. I'll try. It makes more sense when I show it in action. So if you don't follow that too well at the moment, I will show how that works and what it means, which at least helped myself understand why and how we do date tables separately and why that works as it does. So during this phase is when we do, basically, at its core, we do relationships between different tables of data. We also do DAX calculations, which is the data analysis expression. Now, DAX is basically, we know them as formulas or methods or functions, very similar to Excel. You do the sums, the means, you combine things, you create new fields, new columns. I'll show that in action shortly. DAX is, in Power BI, I found myself quite confused between what was the difference between DAX and mQuery, which is another form of manipulation and doing formulas. mQuery is kind of a phase one sort of analysis and manipulation of data, while DAX is after you've brought it in, it's sort of calculations to do stuff on top of the data you've brought in, just to give us results. Aggregation is a big one. So we might sums of values, sums of tables, work on multiple rows of values. So just consider DAX sort of advanced Excel formulas that we do on top of data that we bring in to give us actually a good example, which I can show very quickly, but I'll show you how that was built. Is a DAX formula might have been used, for example, to run a count. Here, for example, if we're going to failed banks, total banks, we can see the calculator here. A simple DAX formula, count rows of all the failed banks in my table that was brought in. So that's the most basic of DAX formulas, just to give us a new value that we can then use in our reports and dashboards. We've seen this before, the simple value in reports and dashboards, just to give us the total banks that have failed. Now, DAX formulas are way more powerful than that. They can do a lot more, but I won't. Obviously, no time to go into DAX. That's a whole new branch on its own. But yeah, just so we know, it's sort of calculations done on top of data we bring in to give us more of what we want. Okay. I'd apologise now if I'm rambling, but I guess that's the name of the game, to just get through this and play around with it. Phase 3 is what we just saw. This is what I think a lot of people when they're starting picture as Power BI, the visualizations, the reports and the dashboards. Do some more of that later, but that's the gist of phase 3. Phase 4, I won't really go into today, but part of sharing was when you get these dashboards, once the reports and dashboards are created, we want to publish them. We publish them to a service somewhere online, and at that point, that's when other people in a company might start looking at them, other users, whether public or private. Sharing is the final phase, when we start sharing our generated reports to the outside world. And that's when you might have, public dashboards that lots of people are looking at. I used to work on environmental dashboards that were available to the public, and that shows, aggregated data and controlled data to the public, same way Power BI might show it. So that's when we share that out. Okay, so I'll keep that quick there. That's sort of the 4 formal phases of using Power BI. Now, what I don't know if this was the nerd in me, but one of the tutorials I did when I was learning, which we're going to go through now, was actually to create a report showing us all the failed banks in the US, the FDIC data. I only started working on this last week. So when I started, the data the last entry was the year 2020, I think, when the last failed bank. And as I was working on the data, it started updating live because, as we might know, in the US, we have the failed banks and just the issues over there in their system. So it was kind of interesting to work on that data, and hopefully that can show here as it was becoming pertinent to, the current times. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of go through the process again with a bit more of a explaining sort of each phase, how each phase relates, and try to use this as an opportunity to very briefly introduce you to DAX and relationships, because they, for me, and in some cases still are, the grey areas. Why do we use them? Why is Power BI so smart? And how does it link these things together? How does it show what it's showing? How does it know to show what we want it to show? That sort of stuff. And I think once I start showing some very basic DAX and relationship building between date and data, hopefully that becomes a bit clearer. But like I said, there are other links I'll share that far more advanced professionals than myself in Power BI explain the same thing. But if I smash through this, I can show that it's not as difficult as it seems. Or it's sort of stuff that starts clicking immediately once you start doing it. So we're going to bring in some new data, which I already have open for us. This is a good way also to show Power BI doesn't need to use local fixed data. As you know, we can connect to SQL databases, MongoDB, any sort of database. It can be Excel, but it can also just be basic online files, which I found nice. I expected if I was working on the web that I'd have to sort of connect to JSON or particular API endpoints or something. I didn't realize that it could just work off saved files, saved in a folder somewhere. So you can just connect to any publicly available data set, whether it's JSON or CSV, a file online, and you can set Power BI to just use that data as live data. It doesn't need to be manually updated or downloaded. It can just be used as is, as if it was a online source. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to start up a new project. Let's shut this down. I do have my backup so that when I inevitably smash stuff together and it doesn't work or look exactly as we want, I can go as a fallback. One thing I found with Power BI also is it tends to freeze every now and then, catch up for us. I have a good computer, but I think Power BI is a bit hungry sometimes. So new report, let's do a new one. So this is how easy it is just to pull. And so we could, I can think of examples, and I'm sure you can, of, where we might have CSV files available online, and how easy it could be just to connect to those publicly available files, or even if they're internally available, you can authenticate to different data available online. And we'll show how to do that now. If I just want to get a CSV file that's located online, I go back here, I'll show again. If I just get data from another source, I can also get data from here. I will see a huge list of data we can grab. So, all sorts of databases, so many integrations. It's great. I'm sure we'll have examples we could pull to play with this. But I'm going to do web. And I'm going to just copy this URL. I don't need to download it. I'm just going to copy the address of the CSV online on the data.gov. So data.gov have tens of thousands, if not tens of thousands, I think, of publicly available data sets. We could use anything we wanted to generate any sort of report that we might want to use. Now, if I connect to this, now, like I said previously, we can sort of do authentication, dynamic URLs. We can do simple auth, all sorts of OAuth stuff if the data is protected. But fortunately for us, this is publicly available data for now. And as we can see, recently updated with the dramas that's going on in the US, Silicon Valley. I think there was another bank in 2023, but I don't think this is in order, but we'll see it when we bring it in. Okay, so this is phase one, the data discovery. And I will have to refer my notes a bit here because I tend to, in one ear, out the other, theory stuff, as some people probably understand. I can always do and tinker and get results from doing, but if I need to sort of follow a process and do theory, I do need to refer to notes quite often. So I will be looking away and following a bit of this as I go through it. So we've got the seed, yeah, we've got the failed banks. Okay, so phase one. What do we want to do next? Authenticate. We don't need to authenticate. We'll do some transformation. So phase 1 and 2, I should have kept that up. Let me just copy and paste and bring this back over, so I can keep referring to the 4 phases and sort of at least show what they are as we're sort of doing them, just to sort of bring that overview of a project over. So we're going to discover and shape some data. That's going to be phase 1. We're going to go back to bringing in, and that data is going to be the FDIC data from the banks. Okay, so that's going to be this stuff as well as cleansing it. We'll do some basic, the cleansing before, was very straightforward, the uppercase stuff. I'm removing some stuff. We're going to go through that again. Okay, so what we're going to do in this case is some simple cleansing, just to sort of reiterate that phase. We don't need the fund. So what we can do is we can remove a bunch of columns that we do not need. And for the sake of this, we're going to remove cert, acquiring, and fund, because what we really just want to see right now are banks and when they're closing. I'm surprised that this doesn't show. There's another one. It's been removed. I'm going to have to play with that later. There's a second bank that was on that list yesterday. Maybe they've decided not to show it. That seems wrong. Which one? So yeah. So yeah, this has been updated, very recently with the SVB issues in the US. Tech people might, be sort of following along there with interest. There was another bank that had failed, and I imagine more was going to appear on this data. But why? Anyway, that's another thing. Now I'm getting distracted. So that's some basic cleansing. We remove some stuff. I think that's all the cleansing we're going to do for now. I could always bring it back if I wanted to go back on the steps, but that's simple cleansing. Just going to remove what we don't want. Just go back to where I was before. Go back to my notes. Sorry, excuse me for a second. Thank you. Oh, I'm just going to pull this in as is. So close and apply, and we're going to bring that in. Now, one thing I can show, actually, let's say I'm not happy with this, which I might not be. If I go back here, I can transform the data again to go back to that screen. I will show some basic, a basic formula here. And like I said, mQuery versus DAX. mQuery is sort of a language, data mashup language. I don't know, it's a bit interchangeable with DAX, but not really. It's basically what we're going to use to manipulate our data as we bring it in. We're going to do so data mashup. We're going to mash some data together, because let's say I want to do a report in the future on how many banks might have failed in a particular city. Now, some of these cities, especially if it was global, there's more than one city, with these names. So there might be more than one Santa Clara, Almena. There might be more than one, there might be one in the state of California, but there might be more in another state. And what's going to happen then down the road, if we want to do, by city, then that data is going to be dirty, because we might just want Santa Clara in California, and we might be getting Santa Clara from somewhere, who knows where. So to account for that, what we can do is create a new column. If I can form a column. So I want to add a new column, basically, that sort of brings the state and the city together, just so that it makes it easy to then identify that it's actually this city in this state rather than a city in a different state. So column from examples. will let us create, remember the mquery command here. So if I type in Santa Clara, it's going to know that I'm referring to the city. Then I'm going to type in CA. Power BI should merge these for us. Yep. So Power BI, being as smart as it is, knows, and it should have generated a combination for us. It's going to merge for everything for us, the city and the state together, just so that I've now created that separation. So that's how easy it is, sort of just to do some quick data manipulation before bringing it in. I've merged these so I don't have to get those cities mixed up in the future. So if we go back, we can show where we were before. We've now got this done. I can now save that new change to the data. Okay, so we should have it already. If we go over into the data view, yep, we've got our merged. Actually, I might rename that. So this is also easy, just change that title because, you know, a lot of this stuff will be public facing on the reports. So Power BI is very friendly with commas and spaces, unlike some sort of software or methods, languages, but it's all good in Power BI. Right, so we're going to start looking at banks that might have failed, which, you know, we're now going to see some in 2023. So we're going to let's create a new, I don't even know, we're just going to start playing again. So this is phase 3 now. Did I skip over phase 2? Let's go back here. Phase 2, the data modeling, I have skipped that again. That's sort of the theory, next phase of theory. I'm going to play with this a bit more, and then we'll go into the data modeling and relationships, because that's when we start going a bit heavier than visuals. And okay, this is a lot slower in person than it is in practice. All right, so we have our data. So we want to know how many banks have failed per state. So this should be pretty straightforward because we have state, we even have city state, but we're just going to get a state by now for now. Should we get that in the right bits? Right. So that doesn't help us yet, but if we get state into the Y, x-axis, this is where I'm always confused. One will count for us and one will display for us. There we go. That's how we want counted banks. So y-axis is the count. Yep. And then x-axis is the state. You know, if the great thing about Power BI, if it doesn't look right, tinker, change, you know, eventually get the hang of it. But one axis is going to give us the count, one's going to give us the state, so we have what we want. I don't know my American states too well. I did look this up before, but I've already forgotten. GA state. Georgia, is it Georgia? Georgia. GA is Georgia, Florida, Illinois, California, Minnesota, I think. So we can see how many banks have failed per state. It's easy to sort. It's pretty large. We don't need all that just yet. All right, so easy way to find, you know, quick and easy way to create a visualization to let us know where banks are failing. Now that's where an important phase we're going to get into later is where, but is when. So we've got where, but then we want to know when, because that's just as valuable, right? We want to start seeing the historical failures. We start to see, you know, we can associate that data with, you start to see where the financial crisis happened. You see the big spike there, and then you start to see the climb, the tapering off, and then we're going to start seeing the climbing again for this year, since we've started hitting turbulent waters again. Yeah, so that's where. Okay, so what we're going to do next is, if I want to know when, right? I know where, but how do I know when? If I have closing date, this is just a bunch of dates that are sort of, you know, are unique for every single bank, right? So they're not even unique. So we could have 50 banks closing on the same date. There's no sort of aggregation of, you know, okay, this month for this year, these many banks have shut down. And so this is why we go back now to what I found was one of the most valuable things to learn and do at the beginning of Power BI for data manipulation is we want to have a date table that we can then use as a basis for our other data to create that sort of visual that we want to see. So we want to see whens, date ranges, all that sort of stuff. And that works really well if we've done a date table. So I'm going to use this opportunity to create a table for dates using DAX to create a generated table. And then we're going to show how we can use DAX and relationships. So this is a bit heavier stuff, but I sort of have to cover it. Refer to it in the future. But DAX and relationships between data are a very big part of Power BI. It's not just the visuals. So yeah, go do a date table. If we go over into this is when we start working in our data view as well as our data modeling view. So we have our data that we brought in of failed banks, but we want to start seeing when those banks were failing. Okay, so this is where I need to pull up my DAX, my DAX formulas. Quickly go over what is DAX again. Data analysis expression language. We use it at this phase after we've pulled in all our data. We want to start creating expressions and formulas on top of our data to start giving us far more valuable things such as aggregates, sums, mins, max, as well as we'll see here, generate date tables that we can then use to sort of build new formulas and values and results, measures on top of the data that we've brought in. Because as our reports and dashboards get more complex, we are going to need to start manipulating and massaging our data that we've brought in to create more valuable stuff. The most common ones, as you saw to begin with, are counts and sums of data. But DAX can kind of be used to sort of generate anything. It's a programming language almost in itself. So we're going to use some DAX today to create a new table from scratch that our report can then use. So we're not going to bring this date table in. We're going to generate it entirely from scratch within Power BI, which in itself is what makes it so unique to just importing a new data source. So yeah, that's columns and measures. Data view. Let's do this. Okay, we're going to do a new table. I should go back out of there. Where's our tables? This is now my newbiness coming, new table. Okay, so that's popped straight up to generate there. That will be fine. So we can see this is popped up with the calculator. It's going to be a generated table. We have the DAX form. We have a formula up here ready to be typed in. This was one of the powerful things that I did have to look over, but then you remember it straight away. There is a way to automatically create a date table for us that we can then refer to. I'll show calendar also shortly. To automatically generate a date, because they're so commonly used, we're going to and we'll see why they're used shortly. So it starts to click before 2 p.m. because I am slower than I expected. I kind of expected it because it's always different when you're presenting. I'm going to use DAX to just simply create a new calendar. I think that's all I need to do. If not, we'll fix it in a second. Better give me a date. Yes. So what this has done is it's automatically generated a calendar date table for us. Basically it's looked at what data we have and it's generated it from the year 2000 to 2023 automatically. The reason for doing this, as I've said before, will start clicking very soon. Initially, I thought, why am I doing this? Why do I need it? I have the dates of closing banks already. Why do I need this? Hopefully, it will start clicking shortly. So it has created this date for us automatically. Every potential date it thinks we might need based on the data that we've brought in. So what we need to do next is we have these dates, but what will save us time, especially as a developer might be aware, is if we have a date object, we're just going to automatically create all the associated fields we might want from that date object. So in the future, we don't need to generate those on the fly, and we can sort of control how they're presented and organized and might display. So what we're going to do from this is we're going to create, from every date, we're going to create a month, probably, let's say, a month, a year, and from the month, we can also generate the month name. And this will give us sort of a nice clean table of, you know, if we want to, down the future, if we want to work with banks that have failed just in January, we're going to be able to link into this table the closing date of the bank, if that makes sense, from our first table. From here, we have our closing dates. We're going to be able to nicely link this closing date into a date in here, which then has an associated month with it, and that will help us sort of write DAX expressions and you know, display our data how we want it to, based on that relationship between closing date and date table. Should change that just to dates. This is dates. So this is beginning to explain, hopefully, why we want a dates table. If we can start linking closing dates to our dates in here, we can start more cleanly generating reports, because we'll see that everything's linked to its associated month, year, whatever we want it to link to. So to do that, we're going to do a bunch of new quick columns based on our date, and we're going to do these using more DAX formulas. So the first one we're going to do is month. Actually, what do I want to do first? Should I do, let's do year. Yeah, we'll do year. Now the DAX formula for year, I think if I have to refer to my notes, probably will, but we'll see how I go. You can use the quotation single quotes to refer to a, this isn't necessary, but we can refer to a different table. So I could go over to bank list and refer to something in bank list. I don't need to do that, although some people consider it pretty good practice, but we're not referring to that. We're referring to dates calendar. We're referring to this table, our dates calendar, and we were referring to our date field, which is this. So what this is saying in that is we want to generate the year based on the date object, basically, and that should, yep, it's good. Okay. Like I said, I'm still pretty new with DAX, Power BI in general, but we've got our year. So another way to try to repeat myself, I'm not too sure how clear I'm making this, but if we ever want to work with data in the future or create reports or dashboards, it's just easier and cleaner for everyone involved, including Power BI and the reports, if we just, instead of having to work with all these objects and date objects, we just have any date from any relationship. In this case, it would be closing date that closes on any of these dates is just given the year 2000. So down the road, if we ever want to slice just down to the year 2000, or we just want to do a report purely on the year 2000, you can more easily reference these dates and more easily generate reports. So hopefully that starts to make sense why we go through the trouble. So I'm using this to show DAX, but I'm using this also to start showing relationships and why we go through the trouble of creating a new table. So this is a bit heavy in terms of if we just want to do reports. Unfortunately, I do have to, nice to cover this area, albeit it feels brief, but yeah, let's get it done. Let's get it done so I can go to the last good stuff. I'm going to go quickly create a new column. So we're going to get month, same way. Oops, new column. One thing I'm not too fond of is how it deselects and vanishes, but here's what it is. Same deal, month, dates calendar, date again, and this is just going to pull the month from that date. So month one, they're all January's, yep. And then one more, and then this is over and done with, I think. It's not month, so yep, that's good. Let's rename this, sorry. Let's rename this to month number. One more, and then this, oops. One more. So we've got the month number, and then we want the actual month itself. So this is a different one that I don't think I can remember off the top of my head. We're formatting. This is a format command. Date ideally, I think that, in a team, you might have someone with a bit more, knowledge and data analysis and formulas to sort of generate this data for us, phase 1 and 2. And then we can have, another member, which I'd personally rather do, have someone creating the reports and the visuals, because they do feel like, sometimes it does feel like there's a crossover between, data analysts, marketing team, and even developer, someone generating reports and dashboards. I definitely don't think it's difficult. It's very easy to pick up. Like I said, this is me sort of smashing something out after half a dozen hours and a few tutorials. But it does feel like as you got more advanced, it would be nice to have professional data analyst, Power BI user doing all this stuff for us. You can import these too. So, if you're using this regularly, you could just start importing your dates calendars. You don't have to create it on the fly every time. This is just an opportunity to show DAX. So with DAX, as you can see here with the calculator, we've just generated our entire own new, so we didn't bring this in. It's not data source. It's not data from anywhere. We've just generated it dynamically using DAX to work with our data. So because we have all this stuff, this is what's going to make it easier to use our closing date to refer to a date and its associated month-to-month number to more cleanly create reports to show us when the date's closed. And hopefully I can show this in a visual soon once it's done. But I'm going to quickly cover, because this went faster than I thought, because I've talked a bit too much about theory, not shown visuals. What I'm quickly going to do here is show relationships. So let's say we have a table generated. Oops, I've got to save it. I hope I saved it. Yeah, I think it's good. So now hopefully a bit more visual, we start to see why we're doing what we're doing. So we have our initial data, which is our closing date. We want to link that closing date to a date in our dates calendar to more easily, so we can more cleanly create reports based on the months and the years. So just make sure I do this right. We can get the date from here. We can drag it to the closing date. And what this does is it builds a relationship between both. Now, this relationship is, how they work, why they're generated, goes a bit beyond myself in this today. But in a sense, what it does is this one number basically signifies that there's a unique date. And for every unique date, this closing date can have a relationship with it. The star means that the closing date is not unique. But the date is unique with the one, and that's because in our table, closing dates, like I said before, we could have 50 banks closing on a single day. So obviously they're all going to have the same closing date, so it's not unique. But if it's linked to here, it's going to be unique with this date. So this particular date will be uniquely, the 30th of whenever. 1st of January, that's a unique date, and every single non-unique date here is going to be linked to that date, and then we can create a report using that. It's just a cleaner way, easier way to help Power BI create its reports. So that's a quick run. I'll do, visuals quick. That's not visual, that's relationships very quickly. I'll just make sure that I haven't missed anything covering this really quick. Relationships done. Okay, that's an entire page. 8 minutes that I just smashed out really quick. All right, let's go back. There are going to be a few problems that we're going to resolve now. We're going to see when we go back to a report. And I have to talk through this. Okay. Okay, so let's just make sure I cover everything in here now. Right. This is how many. We're going to work with when. So let's say month. So we're going to use our newly created months. We're going to start seeing some issues. I think if I've done this correctly, we're going to start seeing some issues and how to fix those. Bank to the Y. So we've got our month from our new calendar. Let's get our bank over here to get counts. Okay, so one issue that could have been arisen if we had seen all these to be the same number, like they were all the combined count, that would have been because we had not set up our relationship correctly, but we have, so that's fine. It can now set. Let me go back a step. I delete this. Oops. So we can see here, all it's doing here is showing the months and it's showing the max count, because it's showing, okay, these are counts of all the banks and these are the months from that table. But because there's no relationship between both of them, it's not sort of building that understanding that, okay, we want to, you know, combine these, merge them together and use them together to, you know, to display that data. So that's why we want to do a relationship here, because otherwise it's just going to give us max values rather than any sort of relationship between both. So if we rebuild that relationship, it's now able to understand and separate the months here. But it's not in the correct order. So that step there is, we can do sorting here. Still incorrect, sort axis, sort ascending. Still doing basically the order in which that we have the data come in. So that's, we can quickly change this. I have to refer to notes. I can't remember what to click. And because I'm smashing through things, I'm now losing where I'm at in the notes. So apologies if I have to go over and find where I'm up to. Okay, yes. So, sorry, my Power BI is just frozen. Just give it a moment. There we go. All right, where am I? Okay, now I remember. This is why I always forget this one, because it's actually handled differently. So we want to just quickly arrange these in the correct way. If we go over to dates calendar, we can tell it how we want it to order itself. So we can say sort by column, month number. Now we see another reason as to why we brought in the date table, because we can say to sort ascending. So we can go over to the month. We can say we want to sort the month column by the month number, by its associated month number. And then we want to set it up here to sort ascending. So we now have January, February, March, April, which is what we would expect to see. So that's another important reason as to why dates are so good, because we can use it, you know, in the values that we created alongside it to better organize and display our reports. So very rough way of showing you why relationships are valuable, why we do a date table, and what DAX is. Like I said, this is me banging my head against the table a little bit and learning myself, but I can genuinely say that it's very easy once you start using it, and you start to see, especially from a business analyst or intelligence, even myself, you know, in terms of creating dashboards and reports, just hooking potential clients up to reports and dashboards in this way rather than building them from scratch could also be extremely, because then, you know, we focus on the data and the methods and the back end, and it would be, I'm not trying to drop any hints here or anything, genuinely, but, you know, even myself in lots of different projects in the past, I definitely see value in terms of just you know, using Power BI to create and share dashboards and apps, especially once we understand them, to show, you know, just to present to clients what they want to show in terms of reports and dashboards without having to build or design them ourselves. And I genuinely think a lot can be done in a very short amount of time, because as you can see, you know, just me doing this, roughly stumbling through it a little bit in an hour, you know, and you can see where this can go. I'll go back quickly and show these examples. If I had another hour or two, you know, of being a bit cleaner, you know, having some coffee and coffee breaks, you can start quickly showing, you know, adding a theme. If we go over it, that will be, I'll show that last. I've got 10 minutes to smash that one out. Yeah, we're showing the counts here, closing dates. We can see the new values coming up. And this is basically just doing what I've just done while, you know, editing the titles, changing the theme, cleaning it up a little bit, changing titles. I don't know I think I showed that earlier, but you can go in and format the visuals very easily. You can start giving ranges, you know, kind of like Photoshop or Word. You can give it font sizes, colors, all sorts of stuff. If you can turn them off, display them, I can make them larger. So it's very easy just to change the design, and then, you know, quick change of the theme, whatever works for you. And, you know, this is few hours with publicly available data. Okay, so almost out of time. Thank you very much for listening to me. I'm going to smash out one more, I think, just to show. I think there's a lot of value in, we don't have to build our own stuff. We don't have to grab our own stuff. We don't have to go through the pain of learning, building, thinking what we might need. We could be in any position in a company and we just want to start working with, while I understand something like Google Analytics has its own very good dashboard. I'm a big fan of GR. I've used it for a very long time. I think even my data goes back to 2011 or 2012 for my own example page. You know, I don't know how you could improve upon Google Analytics dashboards personally myself. I think, you know, they're great. But when you start integrating this with your own apps or your own dashboards or your controlled data with what you want to might show clients, it's good to know that you can do stuff like just connect Google Analytics directly into Power BI and pull that data and create your own dashboards and reports in exactly the same way. So you might just want to show particular years. You might want to, you know, manage someone's Google Analytics account and only show them particular bits of information that they deem pertinent or for their reports. So it does, you know, you don't have to recreate the wheel, but it does let you just choose particular spokes. I just came up with that on the spot. Yeah, you can sort of pick and choose what you want to show, what you want to work with. And then I think because you can manipulate what you pull from Google Analytics after you've sourced it, you know, you can really start, you know, creating and customizing exactly what you want to show and display to users. And that I do feel like there are areas where that could be better than just giving them, you know, direct access to Google Analytics for whatever reason. Which might, and I mean, you could also do stuff like pulling from multiple sources of Google Analytics, different GA4 tags. You know, you could pull from 10 different websites, 10 different tags, and you could create reports merging all that data. So, you know, I guess once you really start digging into it, the possibilities are endless when I mean, you could even pull sources from, you know, a local, a hosted source on top of Google Analytics and do comparisons to compare how good they work together, how they compete, you know, whether one's giving incorrect data. You could do all sorts of stuff if you really cared enough. Because I'm almost out of time, I might quickly just go through how easy it is to grab Google Analytics. It'd just be a case of me connecting, I think, and pulling it and showing it, you know, this is ultimately what you can get. But let's say, and, you know, this falls for any sort of third parties. You know, it doesn't have to be Google Analytics. There are a lot of integrations where they already give us the data we want, and then we can just use that to I think the real power comes from when you're creating single reports or dashboards, but when you're pulling from multiple unrelated sources and using that to create operational dashboards or, you know, large dashboards for your corporation that just show a much larger or mixed overview from different areas to really start pulling value from that. And I think they could be quite large sort of projects that really become quite impressive. I'm actually keen to keep learning, to be honest, just because I see this replacing a lot of dashboard work that I would have had to have done in the past for you know, other clients and other projects and previous jobs. Even, you know, like you can start picking up the value in Ware or anywhere really once you start pulling stuff in. So let's just quickly do one more, if I can fit it in, how easy it might be to connect to a third party. What am I doing? Okay, let's get some new data. And it should be as simple as finding the listed integration, Google Analytics. Now I've already connected with, you know, you get the desktop pop-up screen in the browser to connect with your Gmail account or your Google account. That's popped up, I think, already, and I've just signed in already. So I think it's going to appear. Actually, and I can also show an example. So let's say I have, you know, I've got a lot of old projects and sites. You could sort of start merging and bringing them all in separately. Some of these are very old. If I go to my old website, so, you know, you can pull in any sort of data that Google Analytics stores and shows on their own dashboards. You can pull that in to yourself. So let's see, we've got site speed. Now there is a difference between the graph and the circle. Let me try to find my notes as to what they are. I believe one is associated with actual data and one is associated with values. So, you know, we're not storing So I might want to bring in like page speed. I could bring in all my user data, I think, audience, age, gender. And then I think if I went over to something like Geo Network, you can pull in locations. So you could even start doing stuff like pulling in the locations of your users and comparing them to our previous report based on sales. And I don't know, you could start, making connections there on what works and what doesn't. Let's see. But I don't think I'll pull this in. I'll just make sure that I've covered everything. Just to show Google Analytics. Yeah, if we go over here, this is what I had pulled in previously. It does show us page views. Obviously, this is when I released an old business in 2012. You can see the page views, and it tapers off when I started doing startups and employee. I no longer needed my old website, but it still sits there churning along. Pulling in random few page views every now and then. You can then pull in, I pulled in the location data. So yeah, mostly the Western world. I was actually surprised because I never really did any marketing, but Europe and America gives me more visitors than Australia, even though it was it's a .com, so that makes sense, I guess. But yeah, very quickly pull in the data, start creating reports. I think, yeah, start showing. Not at all. I think I could probably turn it into a stat. Oh, it is stacked already, I think. Yeah, so I can see here Africa, America, Asia, Europe, where most of my, blue is not the greatest color for it, but you can start seeing where the bulk of my visitors have always come from. And so that's just simple integration with Google Analytics. You could do a lot more. I'm almost tempted to pull in Google Analytics from multiple websites and merge them all into one, sort of that are linked, and seeing how that compares. The FDIC data, financial data. So yeah, I think that's me all talked out for the presentation. It's basically what I've worked through. It does seem like less now that you talk through it in an hour, but there's a lot there in terms of cleaning up. There are some links that definitely explain everything I've tried to rough out in more detail, and I'm definitely still on a learning path myself. So don't take everything I've said as gospel. But I can say that, it's very easy and interesting to get into this and start seeing where you can pull data from and displaying it, and where you can use that very quickly. Because I think all of us at one point or another have needed to create reports, whether that's for ourselves or for our clients or for websites or for mobile apps, internal, external. And I just, I'm becoming a fan of Power BI, and I think it does fit the bill, especially the sort of clean manipulation you can do on top of it, and just being able to merge everything together, build relationships between different tables. So yeah, that's basically what I've been learning for the last week or two. And I hope it's made it seem a bit simpler and easier. I hope I haven't droned on too much. Any questions? No one's spoken the entire time, which I understand. So I've just been tinkering along, but it went quicker than I thought it would. That's all. So we're looking at.
Well, you can that.
Yep, no worries. I think this will be shared, and like I said, I might do up a little note coverage and links to where I learned myself, and links where I probably will start learning into the future with Power BI. Because I would like to get more on top of now. Now the next step is to really stepping into DAX and creating sort of far more generative tables and fields completely on top of the data that you might use to sort of start creating, counts and sums, forecasts, all sort of stuff, which is just built on top of the data we bring in. And that's sort of a second level on top of this. Bit too much for today, but that's been my journey so far. So thanks for coming along and listening.